Hello and welcome to yet another session of the Roundtable International Table Talk. And today we have a very interesting subject with very interesting friends to speak on it. Today we are going to talk on ethics. Yes, my dear friends, ethics that help us build us as our value system in our business, professional, tabling, and personal lives. So I'm sure we all are really going to gain out of this session, and it will definitely change the perspective that we think about ourselves. I would now request our very own president, Mr. Graham Cornelissen, to please address us.
So good afternoon and good evening, possibly even good morning to anyone following along. My name is Graham Cornelissen, and I'm the Roundtable International President. So as Sachin has pointed out, we are discussing ethics and ethical behavior today. The question is why? And why are we doing this here and now? It's not because we're bored and we've got nothing else to do, but I mean, ethics is something that we all deal with on a daily basis, and many people actually struggle with it. We will explore what ethics is, the practical implications, and having these kind of ethical discussions and thoughts is something that some people actually deal with on a regular basis, while for others it's actually much less prevalent. It's always good to sit back and think that if what we're doing is good and right. And it's also good to realize that ethics is not just a pure theoretical exercise, but it does impact our day-to-day lives as well. So with that, Sachin, back to you.
Yes, thank you, President Sir. We have our speakers today for this wonderful event. We have with us our very own president, Mr. Graham Cornelissen. We have with us Mr. Giles Wallace, who is the past RT International Secretary and currently the legal advisor. We also have Mr. Tharindu Amarsekere, who is the past RT Sri Lanka president and the RTI Tabler of the Year, the most prestigious award that a tabler can get in his life. So I would now, start our discussion by asking the simple question to Graham: what is ethics as per you?
Okay, so ethics forms obviously a part of philosophy, or it's a branch of philosophy that actually deals with systemizing, defending and recommendation concepts, basically trying to allocate what is right and what is wrong behavior. The field of ethics, it touches values, it touches a little bit on your morals, and it actually just gives you a framework on what to do and what not to do in certain circumstances. Very importantly is that ethics is not just theoretical, but that ethics is only really self-defining when it goes and lives out into the real world practice. Maybe on that, a question that I have for TA, how do you see ethical differences in the various cultures from around the world?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Graham. And once again, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. Sachin, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And in my view, Graham, before we look at ethical differences in terms of, between different parts of the world, the differences start even in our own countries, even within a family. You might have the ethical values that one sibling follows in a family might be very different to what another sibling will follow. At a table level, you might, for example, say that there are some, there are some tables in which it is all right to have alcohol during meetings, and in some tables they might say no, that is not accepted, that is not acceptable, right? So the ethical differences will start at a table level, at a family level, right? If you take regionally, before I come into tabling, let me say when it comes to respect for elders, looking after elders. Now, Sachin and I, we are from a particular part of the world, from India and from Sri Lanka, where when we as children, when we become adults, we are expected to look after our parents. If the news comes out that myself or Sachin has gone and enrolled our parents at an elder's home and kept them there, even though it may be for very practical reasons, like maybe we don't have time to look after them, we don't have people to look after them, maybe we are going to work, so there's no one at home and they need proper medical care. As a result, they have to be at an elder's home. But that will not, most of the time, that will not be acceptable, at least in a large part of the country, because of the ethics. Both, Hinduism, Sachin comes from a country where Hinduism is predominant, and I come from a country where Buddhism is quite predominant. And in both religions, ethics is heavily influenced by religion, and in both religions, looking after parents is highly spoken of, and any kind of distancing them and not looking after them or passing on is looked down upon. And the society, because ethics, mind you, gets defined, the country's ethics on a larger scale gets defined by the society. And you will realize that in both our countries, that fact of, let's say, going and enrolling our parents into elders' home will be severely criticized, not from a legal viewpoint, but from an ethical viewpoint. Having said that, in Sri Lankan case law, Gilles, as a lawyer, this might be of interest to you. In Sri Lankan case law, there are instances where the judge has ordered children to take their parents away from the elders' home and keep them at home and look after them, right? Such precedence is there. So law has been influenced by ethics. At a table, at a tabling level, Graham, and let me give this example. Now, for example, if you take hunting, right? I know in some countries with tabling, hunting is quite a leisure activity. It's an accepted leisure activity, and there's no problem in that, right? Having said that, there are some cultures, like especially if you take in our case, any kind of hunting or like a sporting activity that involves killing of animals will be severely looked down upon. Okay. Now, if you ask me as a Sri Lankan, I'm not a vegetarian. I love my meat. Yeah, but I will never. And when I come to South Africa, I love the braai. I love the tandoori. When I come to India and in Luxembourg, we were enjoying all types of good food just before the pandemic took its toll. But if you ask me, Graham, will I eat my meat? Absolutely. But will I go and be involved in any kind of hunting or any kind of fishing activity? Probably not. And I still remember 2017 when I was visiting Finland and I was staying with my very good friend Saku, and I was enjoying the hospitality, all that, and I was home hosted. So Saku said, tomorrow you either come fishing with me on the boat, or you have to stay at home and look after, and you will have to accompany my family and help them with the supermarket shopping. Well, I would say I went for the supermarket shopping option because my ethics and some of my religious values actually prevents me from participating. So sometimes when we have seen certain hunting events being organized at a tabling level, I have actually voiced out my concern, especially when there was time where I was the community service convener for RT International. I voiced out my concern and said, guys, look, I understand it's okay for a country to do this, but do we really need to create a brochure with pictures of dead animals, etc.? Because when this gets thrown around, and mind you, worldwide ethical values are changing. People are talking about things like animal cruelty, etc., way more than in a way more bigger way than before now. So I said, do we really want to send this out? Because if a strong media channel picks up and tries to position Roundtable as a body which is promoting, cruelty to animal and hunting and killing, what kind of impact will it be? So country to country, that's my experience in tabling and outside tabling as to how ethics will have an impact and difference. I hope I did justice to your question, Graham.
Yes, Tharindu, I think that was a wonderful perspective and practically connecting it to different cultures or different parts of the world. Ethical considerations, should be considered, but that's one side of a coin. Other side being the law. To my friend Gilles, what is the interaction between law and ethics?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Sachin. And again, thank you very much for having me and for giving this wonderful opportunity to speak to Roundtable again. I think it's one of the most crucial questions to clearly delimitate where ethics begin in contrast to the legal considerations. The legal considerations is in the end something very, I would almost be tempted to say easy, because it is a set of rules that everyone knows and everyone should abide to. So that's clear. That's got its advantages. We know where we stand. We know how we want to interact with that, and we know what we can do and what we can't do. All of that is either said in Luxembourg law for the aspects pertaining to Roundtable International. It is partly said in the RTI constitution, in the constitutional documents. You will find answers to that question. So you will very clearly know what you absolutely can and absolutely can't do. So that's very important. And it gives you a basis to understand the basic functioning of the association, of the legal limits you have. And so the law in itself is really a set of rules and regulations that are clear. You know what to expect, you know how to handle them. When you now ask me, how does that interact with ethics? This is where the fun begins, because ethics, as we've just seen with TA mentioning certain examples as to cultural differences, well, obviously, those ethics might be very different coming from one person to another, coming from one culture to another, and they might actually clash with the pure legal considerations. They might or might not. It might be the same, it might not be the same. And I think that's very important to understand, that even though something is legal, that does not mean it is ethical. And the other way around, even though something might be ethical from your point of view, that does not mean it is legal from an association point of view. And I will sort of gradually move over to address a question to Graham, because he is obviously the big boss of this entire thing. I think it's important, besides the cultural difference and besides the legal considerations, to actually see what you think about how your personal ethical considerations, so those values that you grew up with and that you believe in, interact with ethical considerations pertaining to an association such as Roundtable. So Roundtable in itself, in my view, also has a set of ethical rules that it abides, certain traditions, and those might also clash with your personal ethical values. And so it would be interesting to see how you evaluate this interaction and how you work with that in an international context.
Thank you, Jill. Very interesting and quite a complicated question. And I think if we just break this down a little bit. So ethics has got to do with your personal upbringing. And I think, as Tia mentioned earlier, it does have connotations to religion, where you were brought up, how you were brought up. All of this actually forms base of an individual's values and their characters. So at the end of the day, your personal ethics is coming from who you are right now, how you were brought up, and where you're also coming from. Now, yes, your personal ethics and, let's say, the world out there's ethics might be very, very different. We must always remember that you have got your personal ethics, then you've got ethical behavior, you've got ethical leadership, but then there's actually certain societal values and societal ethics as well. We can see it from our peers, and this differs between groups, not only between different countries or associations, but it actually can differ within a specific country as well. And over time, your societal ethics or your peer ethics, that will actually go and change. The tricky part comes in is where this does clash. At times like this, I mean, you will need to go and have a look at exactly who you are and what the clash is, and then actually go and understand, are you just there? You must understand the position that you are in. You must understand what portfolio you are holding, and if that portfolio does not maybe have some ethical rules actually coming along with that. Now, very, very importantly, these societal ethics or these association-wide ethics, that must be, you must be aware of it. You must be cognizant of this, but you can never let that determine your actions, because very importantly is that each of us, we are all very responsible for our own actions. I hope that answers your question, Jill.
Yes, I mean that was a wonderful view on how we put the ethics towards social context. My next question is to Mr. TA. Many a times we need to make or not make decisions. Is it really right to hide behind the curtain of ethics, whether we need to make or not make a decision as well?
That's a very good point. It's kind of those crossroads that you find yourselves in, where you know the right decision to make at that point of time, but at the same time, you might not really agree with it. Your ethical values might really not agree with it. It's like, let's say you have it can be even in our own organizations. You know that there's a good friend of yours who is carrying out something which is detrimental to the organization, but due to your ethical values, you don't want to be a part of it, but because of the friendship, you really can't say anything. Maybe your ethical value is, I'm not going to, kind of push my friends to the guillotine, and I'm not going to expose my friends. We find ourselves in these kind of situations all the time. Just to let you know, Sachin, about 3 weeks back, a very senior colleague, a very senior person in one of the places that I'm attached to, came up to me and said, I know you're doing this particular project, but I don't think this is the right time. I want you to stall it. No, this is not in roundtable, this is in work. And at that point of time, I said, look, why don't you tell to the CEO about it? Why don't you tell? And he's like, no, I don't want to talk with him. You stall it for me. You're my guy. I believe you. As much as I'm a very close friend of his, my ethical values kind of don't really let me do that. All right, because and I made the decision that I'm going to go ahead and continue the project because the project has followed all the right procedures. So I don't think it's right for us to use ethics as an excuse and not really do something. What we need to ask ourselves is this is a very simple guideline in my view. Is this the right thing for the organization? When I say organization, it can be your place of work. It can be your round table. It can be anything for that matter, right? But is this the right thing? Will my action be of greater good to the organization, right? And number 3, is my action avoiding putting any particular party into undue difficulty? If those 3 questions are successfully ticked off, I think you should go ahead. Sometimes, even though it might not necessarily be in line with your ethics, right? But of course, at a personal level, like we might go for a dinner and they serve a lot of meat, and if you're a vegetarian, then also you're in ethical dilemma where your ethics are saying, your personal ethics are saying not to eat, but at the same time your social ethics are like, now you can't really be rude. At that point of time, I think it's okay to go with your personal ethics, because at the end of the day, it's your ethics and how well you followed it that allows you to live with yourself. And if you violate your own personal ethics too much, you'll find it hard to live with yourself, for you to accept yourself. And that's a very dangerous position and a dangerous place to be in. That's exactly why so many people who carry out fraud, who carry out, crimes, massive frauds at banks and all that, we find them committing suicide sometimes because they find it very hard to live by themselves, right? To live because of the fact that they've done something probably that violated their own personal ethical values. So I would say no, ethics is not a reason, or an ethical dilemma is not a reason for you to hide behind and not take any action. But it's an interesting question which I want to pose to Jill. Jill, why do you think, Gilles, why do you think that ethics so many times gets in the way of decision making? And do you think that we really understand our own ethical values that we have? Because I personally sometimes end up discovering different ethical values that I never knew to exist even within me.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's a very, very interesting turn on. We need to make certain things clear, and building on what you just said, not only are ethics a very difficult thing to put boundaries around, because we never know where ethics stop and where sort of legal considerations or even moral considerations come into play. And I think it's important to really focus on this distinction between what is really me, what is really intrinsic to me, and what is part of a greater set of values I've either inherited or I believe in, or I tend to follow because everyone follows it. I think that's very important for each and everyone to fully understand and to get an idea as to how do I tick, what makes me tick, and where are the elements that are really important for me to work with. And if you don't have this ethical subset of reflection within yourself, well, ironically enough, ethics can get in your way of decision making. You mentioned it just, TA, insofar as you can hide behind ethics to not make a decision, but making a decision, you can also struggle to align it with what you think your ethical values are. And you will be faced with a choice where you say, like, well, if I do this, or if I proceed with this, then I basically betray what I think I believe in. But once you come to this stage, I think it is very important that first and foremost, you have asked yourself the question, what is my ethical consideration? Why do I struggle with making a decision that I know may be right, or that I feel may be wrong? And this is where this understanding process and this self-reflectory process is so important, to clearly identify the values that you believe in. And I think that's also something from last year when I had the chance to be on the RTI board with Graham. That's something that we also discussed, that people, I would say, struggle with ethics. They don't know intrinsically what makes them tick. They have a feeling that something's wrong, but they can't put a finger on it. And I think that's something crucially important for everyone who's involved in decision making, to have your set of values at hand. Wouldn't you agree, Graham?
Gilles, I would completely agree with you. You need to know who you are. You need to know you need to know your non-negotiables, what you stand for and what do you not stand for. This obviously will differ between people. But as you rightly said, is once you actually know who you are and know why you are here, then it becomes very, very quick and simple to actually go and make decisions which for other people might be tough. Then I think lastly, once again, we are all adults here, and we must realize that our life and our choices are completely in our hands. So the choices that you then make based on your ethical framework and your values that you have, is that with this power actually comes a lot of great personal responsibility. And then by making these different choices or taking these different actions, you actually take responsibility for what is going on in there as well. But very importantly, and this is just to reiterate what you said, if you know who you are, if you are comfortable with what drives you and you understand your why, then actually the decisions that you make really cannot be incorrect. But unfortunately, not a lot of people do that, or not a lot of people have that clear understanding of who they are and why they are here.
Well, that was a real good viewpoint on, asking yourself, who am I? And before every decision you make. With this, my next question is to TA. On we heard a lot about ethics and how they mean in different cultures socially and things like that, but how do we put all these learnings we just had into real life, or in real practice?
Yeah, I mean, we have discussed so many things today, Sachin. I would say, look at your current workplace, and let's start there, right? Where is it? Do you feel in conflict? Or should I do it or not do it? And then apply these learnings. Apply these learnings and ask, okay, look, I'm delaying a particular decision because of the conflict. Which side of the conflict should I be in? How do I really separate between a real ethical dilemma versus just a simple confusion, right? And then maybe take it up at a table level. Maybe if you were not speaking out on certain things because you were worried that it's against the ethics of your table to really speak out on certain things, maybe it's time, and let's say if it's in conflict with your own values, you are most welcome to say, look guys, I'm going to say this because I'm saying this because I find it a conflict, and I'm sorry if I'm disrespecting anyone, but this is what I think about this particular scenario. This is what I think we should have done a long time ago. I just didn't say it. So start by looking at where your conflicts are. Where do you find yourself in a conflict? And then ask, is it just a simple confusion between right and wrong, or is it a confusion, or is it a conflict between what's ethical and not ethical? And then you need to ask, is the conflict between my own ethical values, or is the conflict between my ethical values and ethical values of the organization? I mean, a common problem we hear, Sachin, with regard to so many different tables is that, and I know this is a matter which is spoken about across tables, right? About the use of certain substance in certain events. We hear this conversation all the time, and I think it's important that if you are having that problem at your table level, at your association level, I think it's important to speak up, right? If you find it in conflict with your own ethics, but you think, no, there's a dominant group who is into it and it's okay, and they think it's okay, so, and that's a ethical conflict. But the only way to really address that conflict is by speaking about it, where you bring it up with the relevant parties or the relevant leadership of the table, or this can even be in your own club, and where you tell, look, I know this is considered as okay, because no sooner when a big majority of a group accepts it to be okay, it's considered ethically acceptable within that context. But if it's clashing with your own ethical values, you should speak up. So I think whenever you see an ethical conflict, first define whether it's actually an ethical conflict between you and that outside or the other party, and then speak up in respect, and that's the only way that you have some chance of really solving that.
Wow, I mean that was a wonderful insight. First deep dive, find the problem, define the problem, and speak up. Don't keep it within yourself, otherwise it's not going to serve anything. I mean that was a wonderful perspective. My next question is to Graham. As an international president, what have you seen as a struggle in a real practical level?
Sachin, what I've noticed, and a little bit of common themes, what I've noticed is people actually don't know what they stand for, what is driving them. And you actually pick that up very quickly with people becoming pliable or saying that, you know what, their choices differs into very slight different situations, and people are actually making excuses. Someone who's got a very strong ethical or values-driven character, for them, you'll see immediately it's black and white. The guys know exactly what they'll do in certain circumstances, and there's certain things that you can see that guys just either will or will not, but particularly will not actually go and budge for. That's probably the biggest thing that I see. We must also all realize that people are different, and not only people, but cultures as well. The ethical values that I might have, or I have in South Africa, will probably be different that Gilles has in Luxembourg, and that might be different that TA has in Sri Lanka. And as I said again, this might change over time. At the end of the day, we would all like to believe, you know what, we all believe in ethic and in integrity and honesty and all of these lovely kind of concepts, but we must realize that people are also coming from different backgrounds. So as a leader of a global organization, it's important to realize that you can't just go and impose your own ethics on everyone else. People are different. They come from different backgrounds. They come from different spheres of life. Your ethics change when you have children, because then obviously your life changes as well. And the last practical issue that I found is that people many times do not understand the role that they are in. And that's actually a question that I'll pass to Gilles now. But something like the role that you are in sometimes can have a lot of different ethical connotations to that too. I think very importantly, it's important to realize that you have your personal ethics, and then you've got, as we've discussed, societal ethics and ethics with regards to your role. And maybe that's a good one for me to pass on to Gilles. With regards to the ethics, there can be a clash between your personal ethics and then the ethics with regards to something that is intrinsic to a role. What do you do actually when these two collide, Gilles? How do you deal with that?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because first and foremost, you need to realize that there is a clash. And I think that's a very important first step. You just need to acknowledge that there is an issue. For that to happen, obviously, first and foremost, as mentioned before and as mentioned several times now, you need to know what are my own beliefs that make me uncomfortable when it comes to taking a certain taking on a certain role, or taking a decision in a certain role. I think that's why it's so important to know yourself and to know, to be fully aware of your ethical and moral limits and ethical and moral considerations that are really, really important to you. Then once you acknowledge that there is a problem, and once you realize that this problem most likely is not easy to solve, then you need to go to the evaluation step, where you say, like, listen, if I have to take the decision in a certain way, or if this role puts me in a position that I have to make a decision, then what do I do? Will I be able to actually take that decision, either throw my ethical beliefs overboard, or will I be in a position where I say, like, I'm not going to take that decision, I'm going to redefine the position and realign the position along my lines? Obviously, it's important to see whether that's possible. Not every role you can redefine just because you think it needs redefinition. And secondly, even if you do that, not everyone might agree with you, because not everyone has the same set of beliefs that you have, or believes that a role needs to incorporate certain beliefs. So that's very important to go through this self-evaluation at a large stage. So self within yourself, but also self within the role you project yourself. And then comes the final stage, which is the decision stage. So you need to take a decision. Will I be able to take on the role, or won't I be able? Because that might be something that you will have to acknowledge in the end, that if a certain role forces you to do things that consistently go against what you believe, well, then maybe this role isn't for you. And that doesn't mean that this role is bad, but it's just maybe not the right role for you. And that's something that you need to acknowledge before you take on a role, or at least once you realize it when you're in that role. You need to clearly communicate, as TA said, be vocal about it and be very specific in how you want to address this, so that everyone is fully aware what you want to do, with that. Now, I'm circling a little bit back to what was said before, namely the cultural differences, and I think the RTI board, as far as I have seen it for the last year, and as I've observed it as the member of the floor for several years, it is a beautiful cultural project. It is, every time we have 15 to 20 members coming from very, very divergent social backgrounds, they come together and try to change the world. So that's the basic subset of idealism we always have operating in the RTI board. But putting that together as a board and as a team, because that's how the RTI board should definitely function, will force each and everyone to dilute a little bit as to what they believe is correct, and to acknowledge that there are other points of view that might be sometimes radically different from what you believe yourself. And I think it's the president's role, and here I'm addressing Graham, it's the president's role to get some music going with that, and that music should be beautiful, because no one's following you, and you will not be dancing with the others. So I think that's very important to do. And my question in the end is, how do you manage a board with different ethical backgrounds, with different social and cultural backgrounds?
Jill, once again, a very good question. I want to start by saying it's very easy to get it extremely wrong. Getting ethics wrong is probably one of the easiest things on earth, but getting it right is actually quite tricky. And being right all the time, I think, is probably impossible. And then, as you rightly say, if I just look at this year's board, we are 15 different people, I think from at least, I think we're in 10 different countries, different ages, different backgrounds. It really is a very diverse group of people. Very importantly, I have found, is to just understand, or try and understand, the differences in ethical opinions that people might have, and then obviously respecting that. I do believe that no one is inherently on the board trying to go and sabotage, or in a group of team trying to go and sabotage. So you actually just go and understand, and then respect the differences that there will be on the team. I mean, that is the beauty of diversity. I then personally, I'm very open. In fact, I would say I'm probably radically open, and I'm radically transparent, in the sense that not only do I share information with the full team, but I actually take input from the full team as well. And from my point of view, I realize that as strange as some of the guys' behavior might be to me, I must realize that my behavior sometimes might be very, very strange for my board members, for good friends that I actually serve on the board with. So what I try and do is I actually go into a lot of detail, explaining not only what do I consider, but I actually go into my thinking process, so that actually everyone can understand what I am doing. Yes, it's oversharing, it's probably doing a little bit too much, but in that way you actually build a lot of trust. Then I try and practice ethical leadership as well. Basically walking the walk and talking the talk, doing the right things, trying to set a good example. And specifically for me, I found that for me personally, transparency is a very big driver, because then at least no one can ask you, but did you have a hidden agenda, or this or that, or anything funny? So to me, ethical leadership is that the respect for the ethical beliefs and the values of others, and that actually respects their dignity as well. But while at the same time actually staying true to yourself and not selling yourself out, because that's a reason why you have a value system as well. And this is maybe a good question to Gilles and to TA. What do you guys see as probably the more critical parts in ethical leadership and in leading a team?
Well, let me go first, so that I have the advantage of having the full choice of qualities that an ethical leader should, in my opinion, have. I think for me, the supreme quality for leadership when it comes to ethics is unquestionably integrity. In my opinion, it is there's no real success possible. And that's true for whatever association, for whatever army, for whatever office, for whatever. If you're in a street gang, if you're not a leader bound by integrity, you're doomed to fail. So integrity has definitely different facets, but it's mainly setting a real precedent, showing the guys how it's done and being sincere in doing so. It is following your own procedures. It is having enough time to do that. It is respect towards your colleagues, your team members. Listening is crucial when it comes to integrity. And realizing also that your behavior, you as a leader, if you're not perceived as an integer person, well, your organization is not going to perceive as such. You are the absolute and direct reflection of the reputation of your own association. So for me, that is, as mentioned, the supreme quality when it comes to ethical leadership. And maybe Pierre, go ahead.
So in my view, Graham, I think the real question there is, why ethics is so important, for the simple reason that's one of your main benchmarks. When you are a leader, if you are not ethical, you simply cannot be looked up to. You simply cannot be trusted. Ethics and adherence to the basics of ethics shall define how legitimate your leadership is going to be. It's like in a family, if the father is not ethical, the children will not respect. The rest of the household members is not going to respect him, and the family will break down, right? Or same thing applies for the mother, right? It's co-leadership. You get two CEOs there, just like the famous ERP company SAP in Germany. At the same time, even in when it comes to in tabling, if a table chairman or a national president is not being ethical, is not following the proper ethical guidelines, you will find that the tabling in that country or in that club is going to definitely face a breakdown, because it's very difficult. We can call ourselves bottoms up leadership structure, but still there is leadership. When you say bottoms up leadership, it's basically table leaders, regional leaders, then the association leaders, then the international leaders, right? But still, at those different points, even at a grassroots level, if the ethics are not being followed, you will find that tabling will break at that point. It's kind of safe to say that ethics is one of those areas where what really matters is not where you are strongest, but where you are weakest. And if you take a country, you might find the best of ethics at the top, at the region, and maybe even at a table level. But if a table's treasurer is not following the right ethics, you will find that tabling in that table will break down, and as a result, everything surrounding it will tend to fall down from thereafter as well. So that's, in my view, why ethics is so important, for the simple reason that you will have the very common scenario of the weakest spot of ethics being the most vulnerable spot, and after that, if ethics is not followed at those right places right across, everything will collapse. So in my view, ethics sets the fundamental benchmark for how good a leader is. So actually, in my view, though I started saying why ethics is important, I think the real question is why not ethics? And if not ethics, then what? I think that's the real rhetorical question there.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's really so important for any position or any person to, have that fabric of ethics within him. Otherwise, some decisions can go really, really wrong. Coming to end of this session, I would like to seek advice, for our viewers on how they can be more ethical in their behavior. I mean, I would request to Gilles to please start with it.
Okay. I think the most important element when you're considering whether it's ethical leadership or just being more ethical in your everyday life, it is the first step. It is to get to know yourself, get to know what makes you tick, and work. And this is a constant piece of work on your value system. Know what particular values are extremely important, what are values where you can sort of play around with, and where are your absolute borders where you cannot cross and where you will not cross without giving up who you are. Once you get to do this, and once you have this in your head and practice it, you're on a really, really good track to becoming a more ethical person, and by that also becoming a more ethical leader.
Mr. Tia, I don't know if you want to go before me or.
Okay, Graham, up to you. I can go.
Yeah,
I
feel
can
free.
go before you. Yeah. Okay. All right. So in terms of the signs, what I like to talk about is the signs to look for in terms of deciding whether your actions are ethical or not. It starts with you. Ask yourself, if I was on the other side, if I was on the side that is receiving the consequences of my decision, will I be happy with that? Will I be okay with that? And I mean, it's ironically, I am from Sri Lanka, and a country where, especially these days, you hear a lot of news about the citizens rising up against corruption. Corruption is a very clear-cut case which it can be avoided if the right ethical questions are being asked. If the 225 politicians we have just asked, if I was on the receiving side of my actions, on the receiving end of my consequences, will I be happy with that? I really think we will not have corruption. So in my view, Sachin, start with that. Ask yourself, if I was on the other side, the receiving end of the consequences of my actions today, will I be happy with that? And if the answer to that is no, stop right there. Then always consult the others, in terms of the bigger picture, where you ask, are we okay to do that? Is it acceptable to do this, right? What do you think? Sometimes, even though ethically there might not be a problem, on the surface of it, deep down, it might come to the question, okay, is it ethical for me to really carry out this action and, hurt that other person, right? It can be as something simple as removing somebody from a WhatsApp group where, and it's, we have these kind of situations popping up all the time, Sachin, right? So what you need to ask yourself is, just because, it's the right thing to do, is it also okay to kind of, let that person really be? No violation has happened, no rule saying he has to go. Yes, it might be the accepted ethical thing to do for him to go, but do I really need to clash with that? I think when it comes to ethics, we need to pick our battles. Just like Sun Tzu, the famous military strategist, said, pick your battles. Even in ethics, pick your battles. Just because something is ethically debatable doesn't mean we should really go to debate. And most importantly, once you make a decision based on your ethics and based on your interpretation of the communal ethics or the ethics of the context that you are in, Sachin, I think it's also very important that we go by the principle. And this is something which I learned a lot from my roundtable travels. I've seen this in so many cultures, and I have also not seen this in so many cultures, the notion of agreeing to disagree, where we can say, all right, this is your value, this is my value, let's just agree to disagree, right? If we can have that concept, I think a lot of these ethical dilemmas, and actually more than the ethical dilemma, the problem is the spillover effect, right? Where it spills over and then you don't want to work with that party again on any other decision. You don't want to move ahead with that party on any other matter. That's the real concern and question of an ethical dilemma. So I think Just to summarize, what I would say is ask yourself, if you are on the other side of your actions, will it be acceptable to you? Number two, when you had that community discussion, what was the outcome? Number three, pick your ethical battles wisely. Pick only the battles that truly matter and that need to be fought. Don't waste your energy on all the possible ethical battles, because when it comes to any matter in life, at work, at tabling, or in life, there's always an angle in which you can look at and find an ethical dilemma in it. So don't go to battle out all the don't go looking for ethical dilemma battles. And number four, and the fourth and the most important thing would be there you get to the notion, let's agree to disagree, right? And you avoid the spillover effect of an ethical dilemma, which then goes into personal level conflicts, and that's when the dirty and ugly politics begin to kick in.
Then, Sachin, just from my side, and I actually completely agree with what Gilles and what TA has said, and integrity being important, and as TA now explained, the why of the ethics being important. So just two pieces of practical advice that that I can give out is, firstly, be very open and very transparent. I hate it when people come and tell people, you know what, this has actually got nothing to do with you, or you're too junior, you shouldn't listen to this, or you know what, you're not part of the A team and you should not. I really don't like that, because well, it maybe makes you feel, or make some people feel good for a second or two, but you're actually completely taking away that person's ability to actually contribute to the discussion, and you're actually breaking down a lot of trust by being very open and being very transparent of the facts and the issues, as well as your own thought processes. That builds a lot of trust, and it actually shows people that, you know what, this is how I'm thinking about something. And obviously, if there's a flaw somewhere, if you've got a flawed assumption somewhere, someone points that out, and then obviously you can go and get that fixed. The second part is something that I've spent a lot of time on, and that is actually thinking on how we make decisions. Now, each of us, we probably make 1,000 decisions every single day. It's the small stuff from, do I want to drink a glass of water or anything else? And most of these decisions are actually very easy to make. Yeah, most of the stuff is actually really easy to make. But when it actually comes to the more difficult and the harder decisions, I don't know how many people have actually really gone and really given thought as to how they make decisions. So what I've done personally for me is I actually go and I have a look at the inputs. I go and question the inputs, whether it's from people or whether it's from external facts. I like validating the inputs to then actually go and weigh decision making. I personally like to consult a number of people who are much smarter than me. I can then take their opinions and their thoughts, weigh that to get a very accurate, believable, it's believability weighting decisions. In that way, in that way, the decision making is the best. And it's actually something that I don't think most people have actually thought about, because decision making feels very natural, and it is very natural to human beings. But a big question that I started struggling with probably around 2 years ago is, how do I know that the decisions I am making is always the best ones? And once you really start understanding these kind of questions, and you start getting a system in place for yourself, you will see that the quality of your decision making actually improves significantly. And that actually then after a while, you actually start getting a much better gut feel for your decision making. But it's always very important to actually have a proper process in place. That would be my two big practical advices to people.
That was really amazing, Graham. And knowing you, I think the word transparency really means you. I mean, being on your board, we really understand that how a person can be transparent even at the highest level. So that's really a walk the talk by you, always, that we also see around. So I would like to firstly thank all the viewers who are live with us, and thanks in advance to all the viewers that will see this recording even after this. So I would like to definitely thank all the speakers today who joined us, and it will be great, for all the viewers to join us at our next session, for which we will be informing the details later. So I think have one question
Yes.
here. I will just read the question. If a table has a particular project to help the community, and within the table, there's a tabler whose company has the expertise or competence to execute the project, is it ethical to appoint that company after having been transparent and informing the tables of the situation? This is from Mr. Pawan.
I'll take a first stab at that, and then Jill and Tia, please feel free to jump in. So, Jen, my point of view is, firstly, be open and transparent. If your company can actually go and play a role, make it very clear to your table. This is the skill set. This is the ability that we have to help. Because at the end of the day, there's always a risk of a big conflict of interest. Now, that is absolutely the last thing that we want to table. But I mean, we must also not be stupid and just go and say that, you know what, just because there's a potential conflict of interest, that we actually shouldn't deal with it. I do believe that it can be dealt with. And as I said, as you're open and transparent with it. The second thing that I would then say is, when it comes to the voting, the member or the tabler who is involved, whose company could potentially be in this conflict of interest, you declare its conflict of interest. I would personally go and present, if it's my company, I would go and present the details, then probably leave the meeting so that there can be a healthy discussion and debate, and that there can be a vote whether we should continue with that or not. And that is, to me, it's personally very important that the person potentially conflicted is then not actually casting a vote in this instance. That keeps it above board, that keeps it clear. And we must always remember that we are a fellowship organization, we are brothers. So at the end of the day, if the decision does not come to you, we're not angry at anyone. You know what, the table would have gone, they would have gone and debated, and we can actually then go and move on from there. So I don't know, Gilles or Tia, if anyone of you want to add in anything.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said. It shouldn't be that just because a tabler or tabler's company has a certain interest or certain capacity to do something that would actually help the cause, that it is but per se disqualified. You mentioned transparency, you mentioned communication. I think that is absolutely key. Everyone should know the how, the why, and the where, and then initiate a debate. And if that debate comes to the conclusion that this is the right thing to do, then you are on a safe road to travel. From an intra-association point of view, obviously, if that project also involves going to the outside world, this is also part of it. Now, here in Luxembourg, we often operate by saying that you shouldn't benefit from table as a company. So it's absolutely clear that you should not make a profit out of Roundtable. That means that you can't overcharge, you can't charge your normal rates, but you sort of have a discounted table rate when it comes to these projects. And all of that is obviously also part of being a tabler. You offer that to Roundtable and only to Roundtable, but then you communicate that to the outside world. You're clear about that, whether that's through, for example, a sponsor relationship, or you communicate what you get for what and to what extent. All of these elements need to be clearly communicated also to the outside world, so that once you're in the inside of Roundtable, once you're clear there, you also need to make the larger public aware and clear the road also in that respect. So that would be sort of the Luxembourg way to proceed. I'm sure that it's not that different, but still slightly different in Sri Lanka or in the larger Asian world.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to give my perspective and my personal experience. So I run a digital agency, right? I have my own digital agency, and when Roundtable Sri Lanka needed a party to do the social media work, I clearly stated that, look, if any other party is interested, if there are any other tablers who are into advertising who are interested, please come along. since no one bid, I introduced one of my designers to the PRO, and I said, this would be her charge, but that charge is without any profit being charged for my company. This is what you will pay for the labor this person is putting into this work. And you can directly pay to that person and nothing should come to my company, because I was very specific not to earn money from Roundtable Sri Lanka for my company, right? But when it comes to a project, for example, it can be an engineering project or something. I strongly believe if you have a tabler who is into that, go ahead, especially if you have declared and if everyone knows, yes, this is the case, various parties have bid, this still is the best bid. Why not? You know, it's after all, it is from a brother and he has a passion for tabling. He'll probably be interested to make the project work. I honestly see no problem. But once again, as long as the right transparency protocols have been followed, I really don't see a problem. I mean, even in business accounting, we have the concept of, related party transactions. Once again, as long as it's properly declared and defined, it's acceptable.
Well, I think I'm sure Mr. Pawan will be happy with the multi-dimension answer that he got for his question. And I see that there are no more questions. So we would like to wrap up this session today. Again, thanks to all the speakers and the viewers. And we will come back to you with our next session of the RTI Table Talk. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you very much.